Philippians 2 presents us with an interesting question. What is the name above all names? When Paul describes who Jesus is and describes how God has glorified him in what has been called the Christ hymn, Hymn, in Philippians 2, verses 5 through 11, it says in verse 10, or verse 9, for this reason God highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name. What is this name that is above every name? I think most people think that this name is referring to Jesus, the name Jesus Christ. That's why we sing so many names about Jesus, how beautiful your name is. Jesus, your name is beautiful. I'm not convinced that it is referring to Jesus for two reasons, at least. One is the name Jesus is actually a very common name. We know that the name Jesus, Yeshua, in the original Hebrew, would have been a very common name for boys back in the day. And even today, we have people named Jesus. So it's not as if the name Jesus is itself a special name that brings with it so much power. Not to say that Jesus isn't a special name; it means God saves. So there's obviously some amount of power in that name, but I don't think that that's the name above every name. The second reason I don't think it's the name above every name is because it says, "For this reason God highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name." And it says this after he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. But if the name above every name is Jesus, then God didn't give him this name after. God gave him this name, or sorry, yeah. If we take the interpretation that the name Jesus is the name above every name, then why did God give it to him after he had been crucified and raised from the dead? That doesn't make any sense. He's had that name ever since he was born. So it's not like God have to give him the name after he had already gone through crucifixion and resurrection. I think the better answer to this question is that the name above all names is God or Yahweh. One of the reasons why I think so is because this name is the name that God gives himself in the Old Testament, and also says that it's a name that's special, that you shouldn't use loosely. Remember that God says one of the Ten Commandments is that you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. So there's something special about that name, and we know that that name has special significance. We also know that this passage doesn't mention what the name is. And so it kind of indicates to me that it probably is the name that's unspoken. Remember that the Jewish people don't really like to use the name Yahweh. They don't like to use the word Yahweh because they believe that that name is a very special name. That leads me to think that this is the name that will be given Jesus, that now that he has completed his task, I mean, he always was God, but he will be acknowledged as God, that he will be called Yahweh himself. So that at the name of Jesus, at Jesus' name, Yahweh, every knee will bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue will confess Jesus Christ is Lord.